Hello, my name is Seanagh Fannin. I'm a director at Carrick Athena, and today's episode is really looking at wealth preservation and how you go about structuring your retirement, how you go from moving from working to retiring, and the way you should go about thinking with regards to your assets and how you place them. So I guess the place to start is where you are currently. You've worked your whole life and you've done very well and you've saved your 20%. You applied our last episode's rule of 50% going to wants and 30% going to needs and 20% going to future you. And now we're looking at that 20% of future you, and we're trying to decide, how do we make sure that this can give you a paycheck or a salary or some kind of income as you progress through retirement and for the next, let's say, 40 years? So how do you actually retire? Do you just hang your socks up and get going with swanning around the world? Or do you have to consider how best to go about doing this so that it makes sense and so that you can make sure that all of your assets are working effectively and efficiently? Making sure that all of your assets are contributing to your life expenses and making this all very easy. Well, logically, it's probably the second answer because it's much longer. No, there's more reasons to that. And here enters the roadmap to financial freedom. So in the last 3 episodes that we've done, we've really harped on about this bag of wealth and providing you with an income to live the rest of your life. And now we really look and see, well, how do we actually structure that bag of wealth so it can do what we've been trying to plan for all the other 3 episodes, and that is make sure that you've got enough money for your everyday needs when you retire. So the idea here being to see that you have enough in retirement, that you have enough in savings, and that it's structured in a way that makes sense in relation to the financial markets. It also is structured in a way that makes sense to cover all the various aspects that may affect that income, and so that it can serve you better. The figure we're aiming for here is 12 million. Let's assume that you actually have a pot of 14 million, and that includes your home, right? Your fixed property that you live in. And I mean your home and not an investment property. So let's see how we would go about structuring this when you retire. And that is why retirement planning is so important. So when we started this conversation back in episode 1, I said, imagine your bag of wealth contains all of your assets, your properties, your investments, your retirement annuities, everything is in this bag. And now as you go to retirement, we need to now look and see what's in this bag, and we need to see if it's going to work for you. So if your home, the place that you live, is the biggest portion of this bag of wealth that you're holding, then you need to really consider how you're going to retire, because this whole equation, my bag of wealth, invested or earning a return of 10% or 5% and generating me enough income, it all relies on the fact that your assets can generate you an income. And mostly people's homes don't generate them an income. It's just a place that they live. They may have a secondary investment property that is generating an income, that's paying rental, that's an investment. But your home tends not to do that. If you've got a bag of wealth where your property is the main component of that bag of wealth, you may need to consider restructuring it, because, especially if it's your home, simply because your home's not going to generate you an income. The other part of that is if that home is here in South Africa, or if that property is here in South Africa, there is no ways that that investment is going to keep up with the rand depreciation. And in the previous episode, we looked at rand depreciation, which in 2023 was 24%. So really a vast amount. Understand what your assets are and understand what you're wanting them to do. You're wanting them to provide you with an income going forward, and you may very well need to restructure it. So let's go back to the structure and discuss how we would break that up, assuming that all of those elements in this bag of wealth can actually earn you an income. To do that, generally speaking, you would need this bag of wealth to be liquid assets. And liquid assets are things like cash. So things that can go into investments, things that are very, very easy to sell any time of the day. There's not a long process. And if you think about property can be quite difficult to sell. As people move out of the cities with semigration after COVID, there's properties in the north of South Africa that are becoming more and more difficult to sell just because nobody wants to buy them. So if that's a really big portion of your portfolio, that now becomes a problem. And what we're trying to do here is solve those problems and really consider how best to move forward. So if we look at this picture, it really looks at how we're going to split up those assets in retirement. And please note that I will show you what each bucket means as we go through it. In this picture, we've taken your bag of wealth and we've broken it into different buckets. There's an international bucket holding 12 million, which is about $630 US. And then from there, below there are two different buckets. There's a balanced bucket and an income bucket, and those are both housed in South Africa. So I'm going to start with the income bucket on the bottom left. The income bucket will hold about a year's worth of savings or a year's worth of expenditure. In our example, we said you're spending 50,000 Rand a month, times 12 months, you're going to need 600,000 Rand a year. This income bucket needs to hold, at the very least, that amount of money. And all that income bucket's going to do is pay you a salary of 50,000 Rand a month. So it's just going to be a direct debit to your bank account, paying out how much you need per month. That's all it's designed to do. And that income bucket will not be invested aggressively. It's going to just keep up in line with inflation, which the government aims to be at about 6% a year. But that's all it's designed to do. We then have the balanced bucket. The balanced bucket is essentially holding 2 to 3 years worth of savings. So in this example, I've said, okay, well, let's just double what you're holding there. We're holding about 1.4 million. And this balanced bucket is designed to do slightly better than the income bucket. It's going to be doing better than inflation, because the whole purpose of this bucket is to top up the income bucket at the end of the year and make sure that you've still got enough coming in from a salary perspective. So why are we holding that amount of money here in South Africa? Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that we've considered absolutely every aspect of investing and what could potentially throw your income off its route. Okay, so we've got our income bucket paying us a salary. We've got our balance bucket, which is just hanging out here in South Africa as well, topping up the income bucket, great. And then we have the international bucket. And the international bucket holds the majority of our wealth. It's disputed, depending on who it is that you're talking to, how much this bucket should be holding. Some people say 60%, some people say 70%. It really is up to you at the end of the day. But what it is getting around, just by having that money offshore straight away, is getting around the Rand depreciation. So you're no longer having to worry about that. You're holding your assets in hard currency and they aren't losing value. So how does this actually work? Well, the international bucket grows and grows probably at a balance to growth kind of return. And once a year, we essentially take that return and we top up the balance bucket and top up the income bucket. You'll also notice that in the bottom right-hand corner, I've got something saying an emergency fund. We tapped on that in the last episode as well. The emergency fund holds about 3 to 6 months worth of expenses for you at any one stage, and you must have that available to you. That can't be overseas, that must be here in South Africa. If you need to grab that overnight, you need to be able to access it immediately. So that just sits there. It just grows in line with inflation, and that's all it does. Should you use those funds, you need to top it back up. So that's kind of your picture. So once we've taken into account these 3 buckets, that's it. That's how we're going to actually structure our wealth. Remember, our goal here was to try and work out where we need to get to retire and start planning for this. Wealth preservation and moving into retirement is so very, very important, and structuring your assets effectively is extremely important. As you can see from the above example, if your pot of wealth is all tied up in property here in South Africa, it's going to become very, very difficult to structure your wealth and make sure that this equation actually works. What I mean by that is make sure that your assets are providing you with an income. In our next episode, we're going to look at estate planning and what factors we need to take into account here. Fact, we are unfortunately going to all pass away at some stage. Fact, 74% of women die single. You are very likely to inherit the family's wealth. Understand how the decisions you've made are going to affect them. Save, grow, live. Carrick Athena, a wealth advisory for women by women. Thank you for joining us.